Hey Ross, how are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. Happy to chat.
No, it's interesting. I've been following your work for a long time, and I want to talk a little baseball as well because I
Yeah,
know
of
you're a big
course.
baseball
I
fan.
am very much so.
But I know you write for Crain's and the New York Times, and you ran for office,
I did.
which is an interesting
I
twist. At one point, you ran for the New York State Senate,
I
right,
did.
against Marty Golden.
Yeah, so in the primary to face him, so I lost to Andrew Granardis.
Yeah, and I know Andrew from when he was the perennial candidate.
Yes, he ran
Way
against
back,
Marty in
once
2012.
upon a time, yeah.
Yes, and then he ran again. And he
Oh
won the
yeah,
second time.
So you got a long history.
Yes.
Let's start with a lot of news yesterday.
Yep.
A lot of news, and I was following you on Twitter, and you basically said that Mayor Adams is in terms of getting the Democratic nomination. You basically said that he's done. You stick a fork in him. Based on all the things between campaign finance and Trump's comments. But can I tell you something? Just based on all of this, from the beginning to end, what's the word I'm looking for, or the term? His demise has been great. He's been throughout the past several months.
Yeah.
I've heard it multiple times already, and I'll believe it when I see it, right?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know if anyone is clamoring these days for a pro left to center candidate. But go ahead, you give me your analysis as to the why, because again, Twitter has just a handful of characters, so I want to hear the long form as to why you wrote what you wrote.
I wouldn't say he's totally done, because I never tried to be that certain, because you never know. So I think it looks bad for him. I'll say that. If you were doing odds, if you were betting on it, I would take the field over Adams. I would say, just to think of it that way, would you take someone else winning the Democratic nomination or Adams? Like, I would say the odds are better of someone else. I don't know who that person is. I think Adams is in deep trouble, even putting aside the fact that he was denied matching funds. He has historically low poll numbers. Those are going to be a real burden for him in a Democratic primary. It's also a ranked choice voting primary, which I think makes it a lot harder for him. I do think if this were like 2013 or any year prior, where he could win a plurality to get to the runoff and then hope in a top two, let's say it's Eric Adams versus Brad Lander, making this up. And for whatever reason, Brad has not consolidated his base, or there are questions about him or any other candidate, right? Adams could win this low turnout runoff election and be the Democratic nominee. And I could see it. Ranked choice, I think it's much harder for him. You've got to get to 50%. You've got to appeal to wide swaths of the city. Adams didn't win by that much in 2021. He was less than 10,000 votes away from losing to Catherine Garcia, and that was as big as his coalition got. It's a lot smaller today than it was in 2021, when a lot of different people were willing to put him on their ballots. Remember, Eric Adams was running as the tough on crime candidate. He had a compelling backstory, being a police captain. As undisciplined as he's been as mayor, he was a pretty disciplined candidate. He was a good candidate. Red Horse was doing his campaign. They did a good job. So everything was executed. Plus, he got lucky as well. We don't have to go deep into 2021, but he got lucky in addition to being pretty good. I don't see how he can recreate that. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not ruling out. But I think you factor in two things. One, poll numbers being very bad, far, far lower than anything any mayor has faced in decades. And then two, not getting matching funds unless he's getting some.
What is the max? Please remind me. 20, is it, for argument's sake, a little under, right now, for individual. A little under 3,000, right?
Yes, it's under 3, yes.
Right. Let's just say it, and I should know this, but whatever.
It's under 3,
But let's say, this is New York City.
Yes.
There are a lot of rich people in New York City, right?
Yes.
With that said, I've heard it. I've heard it from the business class, from people saying, hey, we get it, we see it, we've read the memos, we know we rather this, meaning moderate centrists, saying all the right things on crime, than radical left or left, right? Defund. That's the catchword, defund. That's I've heard it time and time again. And in a city like New York City, I could see a world where him opting out, conceivably, the power of incumbency. When you're wealthy, you can do that. You can say, hey, I'm going to hedge my bets. Right? It ain't over till it's over. He's still the mayor. Right? For better or worse, if worst doomsday scenario, I'll just say, hey, I'm going to make my contributions just in case, but as it stands, he's the mayor of New York City.
So the question is, if he completely opts out, a few things will happen. One, the spending limits will be raised for his opponent. So for like the Scott Stringers and the Landers and whoever else qualifies for matching, they will get to spend more. I think you're right. Could a crypto hedge fund guy come in and seed a super PAC for him? They could. I don't know what they're going to do. I think the business community and the real estate community is in a bit of a bind because on one hand, many of the top candidates might seem too left to them. Though I think I could see someone like a Scott Stringer making his pitch to the business community.
But then you have a Michael Bloomberg, right? Who's supportive, to this point, my understanding is he's been supportive of Mayor Adams.
Yes, he has.
Right? You have a lot of rich people. And you said it. Outside spending, and i.e., right, from a corporate interest, from business folks, right, from people that don't want.
Will they though go full blast? I'm not disagreeing with you. Bloomberg is one I think. Seeing Eric Adams' Trump turn is going to be turned off. Bloomberg dislikes Trump. He's not interested. He's very anti-MAGA. But others are not. Steve Cohen is not. Ken Griffin, these other billionaires who hover about. I think the question is, will they fully invest in Eric Adams, who is heading to trial on corruption charges in April? I think that's a big question. And I don't know, I'm not in those boardrooms, but if you are a rich person, yes, you hedge. But even in 2021, there were super PACs seeded for Yang and Adams. These weren't like $50 to $100 million super PACs. These were, it was like 10 million, 20 million. So yes, Adams could get that, but I do wonder the spectacle of him on trial, even with the fact that he can get pardoned by Trump. Does your average billionaire decide this is someone I want running the city for 4 years, or do you just try to buy a different candidate? Now, they're not all extremely progressive or leftist in the race. There's sort of a flavor of different candidates running. There are some who are more on the further end of the left spectrum. There are those who are sort of trending to the middle. I'd say Zelnor Myrie is clearly trending into the middle. Scott Stringer is definitely trending away from the sort of progressive nonprofit left where he was in 2021, in part because they're not going to support him again. Brad Lander is not as much. Zoran, obviously the socialist candidate, so they're not going to support him. So it's going to be a big race. Michael Blake is running. I don't know what Blake can put together, but he's interesting. There could be a Cuomo entrance.
There's a woman and
Jessica Ramos. And Jessica Ramos, who I think on paper would be a very strong candidate. She hasn't raised the money yet. So I'm actually surprised there aren't more.
What about Andrew Cuomo? Do you think he runs?
I am very torn on whether he runs. For a long time, I was skeptical. Then I started to think, well, the noise is being made. Once Adams is indicted, he comes in. I think Cuomo, and I've written very critically of Cuomo. Cuomo is a very smart political operator. He thinks about the stuff more than we do. I think he knows running for mayor is risky. I think he knows there's a path to victory, but if he does not win, if he comes in second, if he comes in third in a ranked choice voting election, he's finished. He's completely finished. There's no coming back. There's no running for governor. There's no reclaiming his legacy. He's done. He's cooked. And unlike Spitzer had the dignity of going back to his family's real estate firm. He's had a successful career. He seems to be doing okay. He's all right, all things considered. Cuomo has nothing else. So it's politics or nothing for him. So he can run for mayor. He's not guaranteed to win. And he's not, I think he probably at one time thought, I'll blow the field out. But these candidates aren't going anywhere. They're raising money. Cuomo's got issues. I think he has real strengths. There's no doubt running as an operator, as someone who ran the government of New York, that is compelling. He obviously is charismatic. He has this kind of strongman persona that appeals to a lot of people. Certainly Orthodox Jews would be supportive, though I've heard coming out of COVID, some still don't like him very much for his COVID policies. He has a tough on crime message. So I get why Cuomo would be a strong candidate. I think he also has real negatives. Putting aside the sexual harassment scandals that ended his career, in 2021, there's the nursing home scandal from the COVID era, the fact that he took the book advance, the millions of dollars, the fact they did have to go to Congress and testify. There's a lot there. So the question is, in a ranked choice voting election, can Andrew Cuomo get to number one? Melissa DeRosa, she thinks yes. She wrote a piece about that other Democrats will just put him on the ballot 2 or 3. I'm not sure. This mayor's race is really interesting, I think, in that the electorate is changing, the Democratic electorate especially. If you look at 13 to 21, this city is getting wealthier. I'd say the average Democrat now is more college educated, whereas nationally Democrats have a real problem losing working class, non-college educated people. The weird thing about New York City is the Democratic Party here, if you look at who's voting in higher numbers, it is from these either gentrifying or wealthy neighborhoods that are producing a lot of the votes now. I always bring up the example in 2013, Astoria, Zoran's AD, and then the Jamaica AD. Jamaica way outvoted Astoria in 2013. By 21, Astoria was outvoting Jamaica.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know it well.
And so, yes, the working...
Joe Crowley.
Yes, Joe Crowley, driven out by AOC. So I think there's a big, I think of it as like a professional class vote in the city, and obviously there are flavors ideologically. Some are more like the Catherine Garcia style. I think a lot of those people live in Manhattan and Brownstone, Brooklyn, who kind of want like more of a technocrat. Some like, if you think back to 21, they like the Maya Wiley style or someone more to the left. So they're not all aligned, but that's a very big block that I think for Adams, he's going to have a very hard time getting votes out of. Cuomo is going to be interesting. I could see some being nostalgic and wanting him, but I also could see some saying enough of the chaos. Adams is chaos. Why vote for chaos again? I do think Cuomo would be a strong candidate. I'm not ruling him out. I'm not saying he can't win. I'm just saying it's not a slam dunk. I think he knows that. So honestly, he was probably hoping Adams resigns. I don't think as of today, we're talking in December, Adams will resign. If not, then he's in a primary against Eric Adams and 6 other Democrats. I don't know if that's Cuomo wants necessarily.
Ross, you wrote an interesting piece about sanctuary cities, right? And Mayor Adams.
Yeah.
But here's what I based on what I'm seeing and reading. There's one thing about what the mayor is doing, meeting with the borders are.
Yeah.
And there's what the permanent government, the bureaucracy is doing.
Right.
They're preparing for anything Trump comes at, right? I mean,
yeah.
I read something today, the Department of Education is preparing, right, the closing of one of the major migrant shelters.
No.
Seems like the city's taking all of the precautions necessary for a doomsday scenario with Trump.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of theater, right? There's a lot of what's being said, but in reality, the people that make the wheels turn are doing everything possible to make sure, based on what I'm seeing and reading, or hearing, better said, that they're taking all the actions to prevent a Trump, mass deportation, which is difficult as is.
Which is, yes,
but again, there's the theater.
Yes.
And then there's what's actually happening day to day. What do you make of that?
Yes. Well, I think there's daylight between Eric Adams, the talker, and Eric Adams, the political figure, and what the machinery of government is doing, in part because Adams himself has no interest in governing. He never did. So it is plausible that now, I think before his indictment, the government was really run by a patronage operation of people who were very close to him, who had to check in with him. And, he had more of a hand in the messiness. Now, because he's been forced to sort of empower competent bureaucrats to run the city, I think he's less involved, or at least he's micromanaging a bit less. So I think you could see where some of the bureaucracy is kind of doing its own thing now, because there are, again, because of the indictment, ironically, more competent people running the city than there were pre-indictment. So I could see that. I could see there being a real daylight between what Adams is talking about and what actually is going on. Because again, I don't know how much Eric Adams ever cared that much about what's going on unless he was, just putting in his friends into positions of power. I think Adams looked at the city as classic, favor trading patronage operation. Let me put every single pal, Ingrid, Jesse Hamilton, you pick a person, Adonis Rodriguez, let me get them in. And that's what we got. We got some pretty bad government out of it. Now you have the Maria Torres Springers and, Jessica Tisch is kind of running the government. So, yeah, it's a really fascinating question I don't know the answer to, is what does 2025 look like, especially as Eric Adams is both running for re-election and getting ready for a corruption trial, assuming he's not pleading out, which if he thinks he's getting pardoned by Trump, why plea out? Unless Trump pardons him ahead of time. Someone emailed me today that, I was saying how Adams could lose and then get pardoned. Someone said to me, well, what if Trump just pardons him ahead of trial? Sure, that might happen too. So it's a strange time. We've never seen a mayor's race like this.
Talk about the again, this is like for years, it was like really rare, if ever, prior to ranked choice, rarely if ever did anyone challenge an incumbent, right? What is it? 98% of incumbents get... Now it's a thing, right? With ranked choice, now we've seen it. When de Blasio was mayor, obviously there were no ranked choice. This was like... Now it's like, look, how many? 6, 7 people? And that doesn't count Giamatti, who I failed to mention, who's also flirting. And who knows who else throws his name, or he or she throws their name in the hat. But now even look at the state. Now you have Richie Torres. Every opportunity he gets, he is going hard at Governor Hochul.
Yes.
And obviously Mike Lawler, right, who's a Republican, but I'm talking about within the party.
Yes.
And there's always the potential threat that Andrew Cuomo, has also been, has his hands in both pots, whether mayor, whether governor.
Yeah.
But what do you make of the state, the Richie thing? Do you think it's fool's errand? Do you think it's smart? What do you think of the governor's response? Do you think it's better to just, hey, I'm the governor, ignore him and let him howl at the moon? Or what are your thoughts?
I think we're in a moment in New York City and state where there is politically weak leadership. I think you compare it to de Blasio and Cuomo. De Blasio obviously got a lot of criticism, but de Blasio is not actually a weak leader and that he won re-election very comfortably. And the reason he won is because no one felt truly empowered to challenge him, because he had popularity, he had accomplishments, the government was actually run fairly well, all things being considered. Cuomo was Cuomo, of course. He was the king of the state. He was a dictator, but he also engendered fear and respect. So between those two politicians, there was actually a fair amount of stability. And now you have in Eric Adams, a mayor we know has literally been indicted. You have a governor in Kathy Hochul who is an accidental governor. She inherited this from Andrew Cuomo. She didn't win re-election by very much. She has strengths as a politician. She's a very good fundraiser. She does work hard. She has signed into law some good policies. I think there's been no corruption coming out of this government, which is saying a lot. I mean, this is probably the least corrupt Albany I can ever remember. It's a serious government. Serious people are in charge. So I'm not here to say Kathy Hochul has failed, but the reality is she's not a strong politician in the way I think de Blasio and Cuomo were, for all their faults. So Richie Torres, for example, I don't think it's a mistake to look at challenging Kathy Hochul. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think Richie would have a better shot running for mayor, truthfully, next year. That, to me, seems like an easier bet for him. Wouldn't have to give up his congressional seat to do it. I think it'd be more straightforward. Running for governor, he's got a shot. Richie has a lot of strengths as a politician. He can raise a lot of money. He's in New York City, Afro-Latino. He's checking a lot of boxes. The reality of Richie and anyone who runs in a primary is it's going to be bloody. One thing Kathy Hochul can do, I just said, is raise money. So when Cynthia Nixon ran against Cuomo, he dropped almost $30 million on her head. What stops Kathy Hochul, assuming she's still in charge and hasn't had a scandal, and her poll numbers are, middling, from dropping 45 million on Richie Torres's head. I mean, she can do it. It's one thing.
But now Antonio Delgado as well.
And Delgado is looking to run too. I mean, actually, some have said to me with the new contribution limits, it might be harder for Hochul to do what Cuomo used to do. But she's an aggressive fundraiser, and she can use the state party. There are a lot of ways to spend money in New York. So if you've got, and New York State, unlike the city, does not have ranked choice voting. So it is a plurality primary victory. There's also no runoff. So for Hochul, it's great if Delgado and Torres run. I don't know if they both run. I don't know what Delgado wants to do. Torres seems to be aggressively positioning himself. But unlike the mayor's race, if there are two candidates, it's good for Hochul. Now, Richie could win. I'm not saying he can't win. Delgado could win too. Hochul is not that strong, but it's going to be tough. I think if I were, thinking from their perspective, I kind of get more why Delgado is doing it, because he has less to lose. This really is kind of up or out for him. Richie's got the congressional seat. I think he's got a shot at City Hall. So he's choosing to run for governor. And look, there's a lot of power in the governor's mansion. I get it.
But every now and then he takes shots at the city as well.
He does. I mean, but he would, if he entered put it this way, if he entered the mayor's race right now, he'd be a front runner. I mean, he would come in. He has a lot of city experience. He's in the city council a long time. He's obviously an articulate guy. You were talking just before about all these business elites who may try to save Eric Adams if their opponent is too far left. I mean, Richie has swerved basically to the right center of his party from being on the progressive left. I mean, he has evolved very rapidly. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about someone who would have no real estate or, business elite or pro-Israel hedge funder would want to spend against a Richie Torres. So he could neutralize a lot of that money very quickly.
Ross, two other major power brokers in New York City, New York State, and the federal level.
Yeah.
Speaker Adrian Adams, and let's start there, and Congressmember Hakeem Jeffries. People have given Speaker Adams a lot of credit, sort of as a sort of counter on the other side, but also someone who's managed the body well in terms of getting budgets passed, right, in the numbers, right? She's been able to get the votes, right? And even contentious things that are hard in her backyard, City of Yes being one of them. What do you think about overall how she's sort of commanded the leadership of the city council, and what are your thoughts there? Obviously, there's this new charter thing on land use that the mayor has put forth, right? The charter thing didn't do too well on the ballot in terms of what the council wanted. The mayor got most of it, but what are your thoughts?
She's very interesting because she's probably the lowest profile speaker we've had in a while. If you think of the city council speakers in recent years, the last decade, they've all been politicians who garnered a lot of press attention, were rumored for higher office or ran, like Christine Quinn was once on the cover of New York Magazine. Melissa Mark Viverito was a historic figure, first Latina, and she commanded a lot of attention for a period under de Blasio. Corey Johnson was also a rumored mayoral candidate and was very outspoken and very much kind of in the Ed Koch vein of politicians. And so Adrian Adams much quieter. But I think she's managed the ship well. It's a tough council. I do give her credit because it's the most ideologically divided council we've seen in modern history. You have in this city council progressives and socialists. You have Trump supporters. You have very conservative Democrats. You have center-left Democrats. It's a very wide spectrum. It's much wider than it was then when I started covering politics more than a decade ago. So that's not easy. City of Yes was very difficult, and she got it done. It's not easy dealing with Eric Adams. The de Blasio relationships to the council were much less fraught. There was a lot of agreement. There was a lot of working with the mayor's office. They did not ever override a veto. Here, she's overridden many vetoes. So you've got a mayor who is hostile. You've got a mayor who's disorganized. You've got a mayor who's corrupt. You've got a body, a legislative body that is all over the place politically. And it's not a bad thing. That's just the reality of it. So I think she's handled it well. It's not easy. She's someone, if, she had an interest in higher office, she probably could run for it. She doesn't seem to, and that's fine. Not everyone does. But she, if she ran for mayor right now, she'd make an interesting candidate. She's not doing it. That's okay. But yeah, I think her tenure has been pretty fascinating. I mean, we're now, with term limits, the council speakers get 4 years. So it's not like, Carl Hastie can just run this body, really with an iron grip. The council speakers have to work quickly. They don't have as much power, I think, as they used to because of various reforms, because of term limits. Quinn was speaker for 8 years, so she was able to consolidate power more.
No, she was 12. No? Was it 12?
8. No, she's 8. She had 8. She had the second. Gifford Miller had Bloomberg for the first 4, and then Quinn got the next 8 under Bloomberg.
Got it. So
but she had 8.
But she expected the term limit thing was the thing.
Yes.
That's why I got confused.
She engineered. She got the 4 extra years, which she wasn't supposed to get, but she got it. So she really, really, in that second term, too, had a lot of clout in that council because she was the front-running candidate for mayor. In addition to being speaker, no one wanted to cross her because it was assumed she was going to be the next mayor of New York City. So
Hakeem Jeffries now.
And Hakeem's really fascinating figure in that.
Because he's also, he's Congressmember Jeffries is one of these guys that plays federal.
Yes.
But also plays local, as we saw with Chris Banks.
Yes.
Right? He leans in on, my understanding is he leans in on the speaker's race.
Yes.
Absolutely. He puts his hand is in a lot of pots, right? What's the assembly member, that contentious race, the assembly member in Bedford-Stuyvesant now?
Yes, so Farris.
Not Farrah, the other.
Mosley who lost?
No, not Mosley. This one that just won.
Zeinerman.
Stephanie Zeinerman.
Yes, against.
He went hard in his own backyard. He says this is not going to happen here.
Against Huntley, the socialist challenger. Yes, so he backed up an incumbent against the DSA challenger. Yes, Hakeem absolutely plays local in a way that, Chuck Schumer, for all the reputation he has for being around a lot, he does not play in local politics. Hakeem Jeffries does. There's no doubt that he thinks about it a lot. He thinks about who's elected in his backyard. I think he's someone who's watching this mayoral race very closely, I'm sure, in addition to being in Congress. I mean, he's going to have a very busy job in Congress, being the minority leader and basically a divided Congress. So it's, even though he's not the speaker, he's going to have a lot of power.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the Republicans have very tiny margins, so he's going to have to keep his Democrats united against the Trump agenda. But yes, I mean, locally, there's no doubt he's someone who thinks about it a lot. I think he has influence. I'm very curious to see how he tries to exert any influence in this mayoral race. He doesn't seem to have a preferred candidate, but maybe he will. And maybe there's someone he leans into. And of course, we talked with the business community a lot and the real estate hedge fund world. Hakeem Jeffries' word carries a lot of weight there. Oh, yeah. So he could, we were just talking, if some hedge funder wants to give, do a super PAC for Adams or give him a bunch of money, Hakeem could pick up the phone and say, no, that's a bad idea. Hakeem and Eric have a very complicated relationship. They aren't the best of friends, and I don't think Hakeem Jeffries has any real hope or desire to see Eric Adams win another term. That'd be my guess. I don't know him well, haven't talked to him, but knowing his political background, knowing how he thinks, seeing a MAGA Eric Adams hold on again is not something I think that Hakeem Jeffries would like to see, especially given how Adams has broken from the National Democrats. So
Ross, who were the big winners so far this week? Who are the big winners, if you were to pick in the political scene? Winners.
Gosh. I mean, those running against Eric Adams because he was denied matching funds. Maybe he'll get them eventually, but not getting matching funds is very, very tough. Ask John Liu. And I know there are workarounds, but they're not easy workarounds. It's much easier to get that $4.5 million.
Biggest loser.
It's gotta be Adams right now. Has to be.
Interesting. Now let's talk about you. Worst day, best day on your job. Best day.
Best day, like ever, or just in general?
Best day that you can, you do this.
That's hard. Wow, that's hard. I mean,
you said, man, I really got it right.
Yeah.
Whether it be a story, right,
it's
an exclusive, some praise, right? That you wrote something.
That's a really good question. I mean, I had to think about that. I mean, there's a lot of different times where I felt a lot of satisfaction about things I've written or stories I've done. Stories I'm proud of. I mean, I did a piece for the Times Magazine this year I was very proud of about the leaderless left and kind of the left lacking someone to guide them, and also grassroots leftists who aren't looking to leadership anymore. And I wrote a lot about the uncommitted vote that went against Biden, and I was critical of it, and that they didn't actually run a candidate. So it was rather impotent. So I was proud of that story and how it was received. And I think something that's always nice to see is when you go out in the world and people come to you and tell them, you did a good job, or I liked what you did. I mean, I'm very proud of my Substack. I think the Substack has grown a lot. I really like the essays I produced there. A piece that I just wrote on culture was cited by a New York Times columnist, and he mentioned me and linked to it. So that was nice.
Worst day now.
I mean, there hasn't been too many bad days. I was many years ago. I was my first job at the Queen's Tribune. I was fired, so that was the worst day. I was there a year, and the editor didn't like me very much. I think I didn't like the editor very much. I think he was wrong to this day. I was an outspoken kid. I was 20. I just turned 23, and I wanted to do a good job, honestly. And the leadership of the paper was not very good, so. I think the editor was very wrong to do it. I'll say this, me getting fired from the Tribune was a blessing in disguise because it freed me up to go work at the New York Observer for the 2013 mayoral race. Wow. And so the timing was fortuitous. I was fired in November of 2012, and I hopped on to do Observer stuff for 13. And that's really when I got my start in writing about New York politics, and I became a City Hall reporter. So it was a blessing in disguise. My editor didn't know that when he was firing me, and that time it was stressful. I was on unemployment. I had to deal with that. So I know what that's like to have to file for unemployment, to have to wait for your benefits, and to battle the New York State bureaucracy. So I'm very sensitive to that. I thankfully haven't had that experience since. So that was the toughest day, I think, because of the uncertainty. Again, I had only been a reporter for a year. I was 23 years old. I didn't know what the future held. Like, you don't know. Like, am I going to fall off a cliff, career-wise? What can I do now? And actually, I started to blog. What I did was before I even started writing at the New York Observer, I started my own political blog, which is mostly forgotten now, and I did it for a few months.
Good for you.
I kind of like you got on that hustle. And it worked out. But yeah, getting fired was tough. And best day, I mean, there's many best days. Honestly, I think of myself very lucky.
Pull out your crystal ball right now. If you were to pick who's the next speaker of the city council.
Oh, speaker. I was going to say mayor. I was like, I have no idea.
Speaker of the city council.
Speakers.
It's pure inside baseball.
I know. No, that's a really
obviously
tough one.
Who the next mayor is nowadays makes
the next speaker
has a lot to do with it.
God, I mean, the cop out is I don't know. I actually have to think of so it's a limited field in that there aren't that many. Well, actually, no. There's gonna be a lot of candidates because you have a lot of elected in 21 to a second term. I don't. So who? Tell me. I guess you tell me right now. Who are the top contenders in your view? And I could tell you.
I'm hearing Julie Menin. I'm hearing Farias. I'm hearing Kevin Riley. I'm hearing De La Rosa. I'm hearing Crystal Hudson.
I mean, I don't have an answer. What I would say is it's very wide open because the old way speakers used to get settled just doesn't happen anymore. You don't have any block voting out of Queens. I don't think the delegations are very united. I think the only blocks that seem united are the conservatives, where
I would beg to differ. I think Queens and the Bronx have a nice...
The Bronx does.
Yeah, the Bronx and Queens could do something.
You think they still could? Okay, maybe.
I think they can.
Maybe. I mean, the old days, they used to get the whole borough, basically, including the Western.
Of
the
course.
progressives, and they weren't progressive.
No more.
you can get the everyone on board.
And
so
labor could
does,
potentially
yes.
do something like together, right?
They could.
We saw that with Adrian.
Yes, you saw that with Adrian. I mean, I hesitate to predict because also who the mayor is going to be. Whether it's Adams again, is it a different mayor? Adams tried and failed to anoint a speaker with Moya, and that fell apart. So does the next mayor try again? Do they stay out? I mean, it's really interesting. Who could it be? I could see them wanting a woman. I could see Farias or
Latina citywide. Right?
I could see that because the Latino representation citywide has been non-existent. There's going to be. I could see a real push for a Spanish-speaking speaker of the city council. I think you only had that with Mark Viverito, and you still don't have that many, even in the council, decent number, but citywide, nothing. So I could see that. I mean, Menon, could have Upper East Side, Gifford Miller did it, but that was many years ago. I don't know if like an Upper East Sider can be the speaker, but I could see, Bronx. I mean, Riley would be interesting. De La Rosa and Upper Manhattan could be interesting. I could see a Latina, I guess, if I had to guess. That is a demographic that I think there's going to be a push to be represented, especially since there's going to be, outside of the mayor's race is weird because there aren't any women outside of Ramos, and there aren't any Hispanic candidates outside of Ramos either, which it's so
and
odd.
Myri's running as a Latino.
Myri's, does he speak Spanish?
I don't know. I don't think so. I may be wrong.
Then it's like if you're not even speaking the language, what's it's harder. I mean, there's some. I mean, Richie. I don't think Richie Torres does either, but he's.
But Ross, look, we're running out of time. I just want to thank you for doing this, and hopefully this won't be the last time. And
no, definitely.
You're welcome to come back at any time. Thank you for this.
Yeah.